I'm Scott, I'm the head of UX here at Adaptive Lab. I was tasked to do a presentation around Tenacity. Tenacity is one of the things we look for in our new hires when we talk about Pi people. And that's those people with multiple different skill sets that they can apply to a particular challenge. And so I was like, hey, yeah, sure, no problem. I can do a talk on Tenacity. I'll go away and do some research on that. Not a problem at all. Of course, about 35 seconds later, I thought, really? What am I actually going to speak about? So we brainstormed a few ideas with some of the team. And of course, the first thing I did was go to Google to try and find some inspiration and just Google what is the actual dictionary definition of tenacity rather than our definition of what it means. And there was something relatively interesting there. So first off, it was around the fact of being able to grip onto something. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Around being determined, that feels like a quality that you would want from people. But actually what really interested me was the final point that Google spit up, was the fact of continuing to exist. Tenacity is around continuing to exist, and that's something that comes up a lot in our conversation with clients. They're being challenged all the time from different factors, from newcomers, from new startups. Their entire existence is under question. And sometimes people's entire roles are under question. So from a UX perspective, what does that actually mean? What are the things that are coming into play that are potentially challenging us and stopping us from potentially existing in the future? So I thought I'd use this as a lens to look back on the last few years of my own experience within the UX field and try and come up with some theories around how that will continue to evolve over the next couple of years. So my story starts back here at the BBC a few years back, which Nick in the audience will know very well. I was a creative director at the BBC when the Olympics kicked off. It was an absolutely huge success for the BBC. It really raised the bar in terms of what people expected from a user experience. Absolutely huge stats, like 70+ million unique browsers per week. So huge numbers. Absolutely fantastic numbers. Some fantastic feedback as well. But that should really have been expected. We should have been raising the bar. We should have been doing as well as these guys here, because we actually had an absolutely huge budget. We had hundreds of people working on the project across the board. I think when I counted it up afterwards, we had 60+ designers working on it at one time or another in that project, which when you think about it, is massive, absolutely massive. So we absolutely should have done a fantastic job. There's no way we could have failed under them circumstances. So what was really interesting from a Tenacity point of view was what we did afterwards. Because afterwards, we didn't have a massive budget anymore. We couldn't afford to spend wages on 60+ people. That number went down to about 4 designers. The number of, in fact, exactly 4. The number of developers was about the same. Again, down from a huge number of people. But we had a bit of a problem. And that is that we had given our audience this fantastic experience during the Olympics. And whenever we spoke to them, they told us they wanted that again. They wanted that for the World Cup, fine. They wanted that for the Wimbledon, fine. They wanted that for darts on a Wednesday afternoon. Okay, but their expectation was that that level of service would be given continuously. And that kind of led me to feel a bit like this. And he has the same hairstyle as me, so it kind of works. How are we actually going to do that? So we're very typical. With a team of 60 people, people can have very specific specialisms in what they work on. You can have a UX architect who looks specifically at that area. You can have some very strong visual designers. You can have researchers. You can have people looking at specific parts of the site. But when you've got 4 people, that becomes a lot trickier. And you have to really think about, well, how are we going to try and tackle this moving forward? Well, the first thing you do is prioritize. Get rid of all the stuff you don't need to do. And to do that in a proper way, you really have to think about, well, what does your end user actually need? What is the bare minimum they need to actually get a fantastic experience? So when they were telling us that we'd raised the bar during the Olympics, what was it that actually raised the bar? And we had done a number of different research projects during the Olympics to really get a sense of what people actually wanted from it. We had tons of data regarding what they were actually using, what they weren't using. And yeah, granted, we got a lot of stuff right. We got some stuff a bit wrong as well, if truth be told. Some things didn't work as well as they could do, but largely we got some things right. We could focus predominantly at those things and use those things to create a vision for what we needed to do in the future. A razor-sharp focus on what do people actually want from it. And with the help of some of our colleagues at Studio Output, thank you, Dave, We created a video and a set of personas to help us really think about, well, who are these people? Now, we had some personas already, but we didn't really use it in a way that allowed us to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. But we're designers in here. We all know what personas are. They don't radically change what we do. But we had a number of them to help us start to prioritize the different types of features. But more importantly, what did we actually need as a baseline experience that people could then continue to have across the board? And we got to that point very relatively quickly. There were some obvious things around great quality video, great quality articles, make it easy for us to navigate around it, tell us when stuff's on. Apart from that, anything else is a nice to have. That's basically the basics. But then to continuously deliver against this vision, I had to look at the team. So we now had a team of 4 people. Those 4 people had to start wearing a lot of different hats. I had people that were predominantly UX designers who hadn't really touched visual before. Some great visual designers who had never really touched UX before. No researchers at that particular time. So I had to really think about, well, if we're putting the user at the heart of everything that we're doing, every designer is now a researcher. Regardless of whether you've done it before in the past, regardless of whether you're doing it again in the future, you're now a researcher. You have to create prototypes. You have to be prototyping. You have to be creating things from the ground up. And you have to be taking those things out to speak to people, because we don't have anybody else that can do it. And if you don't do that, then we're not going to be able to put users at the heart of everything that we're doing. And we also can't be thinking about big research projects anymore. We have to be thinking about smaller tactical moves that we can start to make. You know, what's the simplest amount of effort we can do to actually test something out? And this is a real example of, we stuck a TV in the canteen and stuck a post-it note on it, super high tech, that said, this is a prototype, please play and leave your feedback. And we left it there for a week just to gather feedback. And then we kept iterating it each day based on the feedback that we were getting. You know, what's the simplest way we can actually start to get relatively quick feedback? But this was a team that, up to that point, had never done anything like this before. So to be honest, it terrified the hell out of everybody. Actually going up and speaking to people in the canteen, actually quite difficult. If you're used to just having your silos, having your focus on a screen and never doing that kind of work before, it was really nerve-wracking. And for everybody in the team, they found that quite a big hurdle to kind of jump across, to actually get the confidence to go out and have those kind of conversations. But I think that's where tenacity starts to show through. Because it's like, well, in order to continue to exist, you have to adapt. And you have to continuously adapt. And you have to adapt the way that you are working. As a designer, you keep on having to reinvent yourself so that next time a challenge comes along, you can hit it with all these different skill sets you have and choose from a number of different skills. As well as that, we also found that the wider team around us started getting a bit nervous. So if you're one of our key stakeholders, you start to frown when you realize this team are busy creating prototypes and sticking them in the canteen. I'm now telling some of my fairly senior level stakeholders that we're not going to create you a nice design deck which has got lots of specifications all around it. We're going to create a prototype, and we're going to keep testing that prototype, and then we're going to ship it as soon as it's ready. So when asked the question, well, when are you going to show me the final design so we can sign it off? I'm like, oh, the day after it launches. And then we'll see what the users tell us, and if it doesn't quite work, we can change it. So again, there was an absolutely massive educational piece involved in that, in order to get those kind of stakeholders on board with understanding that they had to let go of control a little bit and start to trust and empower the actual design team that are working on a project, so that they can start to make decisions on the ground and make them quickly and fast. And I think I can kind of summarize all that up and what tenacity means to me as a designer, or as a UX designer. And I think that is, regardless of who you are in the design field, in 12 months' time, your job will be entirely different. And frankly, if it isn't different, you should really consider it and think, well, what new skills do I need to be learning? Because you should always be learning new things. And you should always be adding new tools to your tool set so that you can pull them out when you need them. And you know what? It's kind of fun doing that as well. And it keeps it more interesting. And it keeps everybody at the top of their game. And means when you are rising to that challenge, you can do. That's me.